There's so much to talk about with this week's games of football. The four finals, I thought they all hit the mark. The scheduling was done really well. I'm going to start with who I thought were one of the most impressive performers of the weekend, and that was the GWS Giants. And I just thought they've handled this travel idea, this hit and run mentality. It's the 11th venue they've won at this year, and they've embraced all of their challenges. And Ken Kingsley, I nearly said Adam Kingsley.
Kent Kingsley.
Kent Kingsley. There's one that you wouldn't think you'd go to. But Adam Kingsley was super impressed with his boys, and so he should be. So round 10, they're 3-7. That's a long time ago now. It's as long, round 10 against the first week of finals, that time that's been covered is longer than at any season that we've seen before because of the extra round, because of the pre-finals bye. But the thing that struck me is they are quick. They are quick over the ground, and speed kills. So Ash and Whitfield off the back.
How much damage can they do, Bucks?
Oh, look, I think that we always think, so we look at these games, so Port GWS, you look at Melbourne Carlton, top four sides are going to go out in straight sets. It happens occasionally, but not often. I think the Giants are a real show against Port because Port are banged up, but the last time Port played the Giants was only 4 or 5 weeks ago. They won by 10 goals. Yeah. But they went in without Daniels and Bedford, who are really key parts of their makeup. And I think it actually helps the Giants because they know that, well, that was a mulligan, and we didn't have our best choice and really important parts to our puzzle. But just the speed over the ground gets so Whitfield and Ash off the back, and you've still got Iden there who's keeping Haynes out of the best 22, and doing a great job. Kelly through the midfield was huge. Daniels and Bedford as those high forwards that get all the way up and all the way back. They put speed on the ball. They defend really well. They put speed on the ball, and so you've got Hogan, Riccardi, Green, Brown. They've got a mix of forwards that are getting the benefit of this speed through the midfield. And they don't just do it to attack, they do it to defend. They actually made the ball really hard to move. They control the midfield with their defence, and they actually they compose themselves and conserve energy in their defence because it is so good. That gives them that chance to springboard when they get the ball in their hands. So that balance is good, and Adam Kingsley should be believing of his group because they're demonstrating it week in, week out.
Love the fact that he took the risk with Taylor. I think we can be really conservative with injuries like that, but he looked really solid. I know King kicked 3, but it wasn't his best performance. Max King and Taylor will be better for the run. Novak Djokovic just took the first set of the US Open final 6-3. Dominant display up against Medvedev, who is standing so far back on return that Novak's changed things up and he started to serve and volley. He's got all the answers and all the tricks. The greatest athlete, any sport, all time. That's my thoughts on that. What about Brisbane, Bucks?
It's not Kane's big call, like in the middle of buck stops. What's going on?
Anyway,
no, all good. No, the second one for me. The second one for me that stood out on Saturday night was Brisbane's bigs. I thought Hipwood and Danaher and McInerney in particular, I think they started exceptionally well and took Port to task really early. But it was interesting, Chris Fagan's comments after about the falling short, how that's actually taught Brisbane and prepared them for the moments ahead. It's not common this time of year to be talking about your shortcomings or what hasn't worked for you, but I think when you can embrace both sides of it and you can accept it with the same mentality, it's really powerful to be able to be grateful for the opportunity in front of you. You loosen yourself up. You don't carry a lot of anxiety. So I think Brisbane are in great shape. It seemed to be in great shape. If their coach is speaking like that, well then, and they're performing the way that they can and did, then that's a great sign for Brisbane and Brisbane fans, and it's a real question for any side that they come up against. The other thing that stood out to me was the performance of their young players, like Jasper Fletcher. He jumped out of the box aerially. He ran hard. He saw key moments. He was able to take advantage of the times where the game opened up. He opened the game up through his own efforts and endeavours at times. Wilmot just got better and better. And when Brisbane were headed, he became one of the most dominant players on the field in that last quarter and a half. And Caden Coleman, so the 3 young guys that they've introduced, they really stood up and to be able to do that in, obviously Wilmot and Fletcher. Wilmot played in the finals last year, but Fletcher in his first final, and Coleman, who's become the architect from the back. So, and then you add that to, we'll speak to Cam Rayner later this morning, and his performance, he's made for finals, as you said. He hasn't broken any posts yet, so I don't know if he can be Lee Matthews.
He just was just like looking at Port Adelaide players with disdain and saying, "You want to tackle me? Good luck."
Yeah.
Like, I reckon he broke more tackles than any individual player this year. It was like Dustin Martin sort of stuff, and Port would be really disappointed with their performance physically. So the thing out of that game is that Neil, who has such a good record against Port Adelaide, was well held, and William Drew did an outstanding job.
3 touches, like 5 minutes from the half time.
Yeah, they still kicked 13 goals from stoppage.
Yeah.
13, which is just off the charts in sort of the numbers. And Hugh McCluggage, I mean, what a player. What a player he's been for Brisbane for so long. What a consistent performer. 9 clearances he had to go inside and do that when Neil was well held.
Correct. And when you talk about, forward connection, and you see a bloke like McCluggage get the ball. Now he doesn't finish that well when he gets his own chances at the sticks, but if you find half a metre inside forward 50 and you've got a little bit of space, he'll kick it to your advantage and draw you into the usable
rank
space.
Them Bucks, rank the teams and the likelihood of winning a premiership right now as it sits.
With the 6 teams that are remaining.
Yeah, well, just give me the 4.
Well, I think the most likely grand final is Collingwood-Brisbane, given that they're there. I think GWS would probably be favoured. I would favour them into that game. I think the odds will have Port as favourites, but I think that GWS they're one of those teams that just look like they're on the tear. And I haven't had a bad day for 3 months, so I think they'll be okay. I'm not that concerned about Melbourne. I think Melbourne will be okay, and I'll get to that.
All right, well, let's get to the moments that some players would like to have back.
Yeah, the third part for me is just bad kicking's bad footy, and we saw there was 3 of the sides that lost on the weekend had more shots on goal in transition than their opposition. So stoppage became really key, but key moments, opportunities in front of goal, you need to take them. And it's the most important kick in the game is to be able to finish when you get your opportunities, whether it's a snap or a set shot. And bad kicking is bad footy. Like in the end, it is a reality. If you've to get 69 inside 50 is not finished off. Bayley Fritsch is one of the better finishers, either in general play or set shots. But he was a little off.
A little.
I think Cozzy had 2 snaps, one in the third and one in the last, right at the death, that he would normally gobble up. Mm-hmm. Now, one of them was under not great pressure. It was perceived pressure, and the other was under a little, but he's been able to finish at other times. So I don't think Melbourne will be that worried, and I'll get to that, but I don't think they'll be that worried because I think they just had one of those games where they just weren't able to finish, and I'm not overly concerned about it.
They still need to address what is going on with the forward line and their entries and how predictable and how slow and how high that ball is going inside.
Yeah, we're going to give Collingwood some credit. They got back in number. But the other one is obviously Todd Marshall, who's one of the better shots at goal across the competition this year and just couldn't meet the moment. Now it's a challenge. It's going to be a challenge for him coming up again. But I think he's got the right medal. But yeah, it has a significant impact in the momentum of the group, the flow of the group, the belief of the group. When you've done work, you want to finish. There's always a little bit of anxiety around a final. You want to jump in and you want to take advantage of your chances. And if you don't take them, there can be a concern that they're not going to come around again because the finals are marginal. So being able to finish is crucial.
All right, tell us about the Ds.
Yeah, I think the Ds will be okay. Their midfield's up and going. For them to be able to have 46 inside 50s to 22, they got jumped by Collingwood, and that was the margin in the game. But I heard Simon Goodwin talk after the game, and his words were around glass half full. And I think he's got every reason to believe in his group. You're talking about sort of Melbourne's entries, and I know you can get flat on Melbourne, but I think that I had a look at the second half in particular, and there was 36 inside 50s in that second half. I thought that Collingwood defended exceptionally well. They committed extra numbers to behind the ball at stoppage in particular. It was nearly like they were flooding at times. and then they were happy to play their run and gun game going back the other way. It nearly cost them because Melbourne got so dominant through the midfield and forced the ball forward so often. But you've got to say the tactic worked. And Craig McRae said after, he said, look, the only number that matters to us is the scoreboard at the end. And, you can look at inside 50s, you can look at contested ball. Those numbers don't matter. We were able to get the job done. And I agree with Craig in that regard. But I'm also not discouraged if I'm Simon Goodwin. In terms of their forward setup with Van Rooyen, I just think you put in the most competitive, medium-sized player that you can find.
Not Grundy.
I don't think you do. I don't think that's the answer. I think Smith, now that they may well go the other way, but I think Gawn's been going exceptionally well. I think Petrarca and Oliver through the midfield have been great. James Jordan hasn't been. He's probably the next big-bodied player that has to come in potentially for Brayshaw. For Van Rooyen, I just think you just need the next competitor, and I'll go to Carlton last here, and when I go to Carlton, it'll be about they just pick their best competitors, their best ball winners, the guys that are prepared to put second and third efforts in. I think that's the type of player that Melbourne need to look for again as their 22nd player to take into.
I think that'd be concerned about McDonald as well. His lateral movement, his movement in general, it didn't look to be at the level that's required for a final. So can Grundy give you what he gave you, but also have the flexibility to go in the ruck? So if you want to use Gawn in the forward half or as a target inside forward 50 when you don't have a winner, I think that would be some nice flexibility to have.
All you need to do is answer what happens when McDonald's in the ruck for that 10%. That's all you need to answer.
Yeah, but not if he's not competing forward as well, McDonald.
He just becomes a structure player.
Okay.
He just becomes.
Grundy can't be that structure player, but a better ruckman.
He hasn't proven to be, and unless, as you said, they've already gone down this path. They've already decided it. Now when Petty got injured, Grundy came back for one. Grundy played for a half. Smith played for a half as a forward, and then they went away from it. So I think. I don't think that's the answer. I think Simon Goodwin and the Melbourne Match Committee have already decided that that's not the answer. For me, like if you're a Carlton fan, obviously you're wrapped. You've won a final. You've seen Paddy Cripps. You've seen Charlie Curnow. You've seen all of these boys that are playing their first final after a significant time out of the finals, and you've beaten a side last year who went all the way to the grand final. I don't think Sydney were great. I think McCartan did the job on Charlie Curnow. Harry Mackay didn't have much to do. Mills and Cripps was pretty much even. But I just thought that Carlton's bottom six, and we talk about, you hear this spoken about quite a bit, their bottom six were huge. I think Brody Kemp's a really good player, did his role really well. I think Chincotta is a player who just wins his one-on-ones. He had 9 touches, but he just doesn't, it's just hard to beat.
What about Cottrell?
Cottrell, 17 touches. He had 2 goals and 13 touches in the first half. Is probably the most impactful player on the ground. At that stage, Walsh and Sherratt had 16 touches each, and they were great, both of those players. But Akers was not going to play this game 2 weeks ago with his collarbone and ended up being significant. I wouldn't put him in your bottom 6, but Cunningham and Fogarty, they left Fisher out, who'd been getting 30 touches a game off halfback. They left Hollands out, who's a younger player, to bring Doherty in to play on the wing. Motlop played as the sub, and Paddy Dow, who's played a really important role, and I reckon would feel more a part of this journey than he did 12 weeks ago. But the coaching staff at Carlton decided that we want the biggest, strongest, and they went with that extra with Pitnet with an extra ruckman. So we want the biggest, strongest 22 that we can possibly find. A team that we know is going to stand up in the contest, a team that we know is going to go for second and third and fourth efforts, and every individual is going to give and empty everything of themselves. There's not going to be any half efforts. There's not going to be any arms in. It's going to be head over the ball, and I think that was the primary reason that they were able to get the job done, and it's a reason why they'll give themselves a chance against any opposition. Yeah,
it's a good matchup. They won in round 22, I think it was, against this side with some key players out as well. Just on the selection, there was 2 selection calls for different games that were much debated on Thursday and Wednesday when those teams were announced. The first one was Cox and playing with Cameron and Collingwood and leaving Noble out. correct decision to make, I think, in the end, and they're justified by doing
I don't
that.
think I don't think they're related at all, though.
No, no.
The double ruckman and a running defender are not related.
But Cox wasn't in the side 4 or 5 weeks ago, so to back him in and to go with him at this stage of the year and to do the tag teaming job on Gawn was enormous, but I thought that was the right call. And to leave Noble out in the end was justified with the makeup of that side. You maybe the way you're looking at me. You
no.
disagree.
They won a game. They won the game of footy, but I don't think that was. I don't think it was going to win them or lose them the game. So maybe that's the right call then. If you're taking a player out who's not going to change
when you talk about
the dynamic of the
contest
game
and winning contest and picking players who are incredibly competitive, and I think that was the right. If there's one knock on Noble, it would be his one-on-one work, and in a final to leave him out was justified with the team that they picked.
It had to be.
Hoskin Elliott was huge. He would have been in the mix to lose his spot as well.
No, Markov was the one that has come from the clouds because Hoskin Elliott he play half forward, he can play half back, he plays as the third winger. Markov was the one that kept his spot in front of John Noble. The knock on Markov at times is that he hasn't put his body on the line when it's been necessary. And you might say, like, John Noble's a small player, but his ground ball stuff is really strong. He will keep his head over it. But Markov twice in the last quarter went back. Once he went back with a flight, and another time he went back and took a chest mark. Twice where he had a choice of whether he was going to go or not go, and he went hard, and he had key moments where he really stood up. So that would have been validating for him and for the selection group because he stood up in those moments, which I think is growth from what we've seen of him in his. You've got strengths, and then we've got things that you're not as good at. Now Markov, open field runner, hard runner in the contest. Maybe a 6 or a 7 out of 10, but he had 8, 9 out of 10 efforts when the game was at its fiercest. So great effort.
And the other one was the Blues picking the two ruckmen and going tall, and obviously that helped with Mackay going off. So you had that covered. Who does the result speak volumes about? We'll go through the 4 finals. I'll start on Thursday night. I think it speaks volumes of Melbourne. They're still in a very good position. And don't be surprised if it's not Collingwood and Melbourne facing off in a grand final. 85% of their game is in excellent order. They defend so well. To keep Collingwood to 37 entries was a terrific performance. Yep, they got some issues with their forward line, which they have had in the past, but they're going to give themselves a shot. Their contest work is excellent. Their defence is rock solid, and that's what wins your finals. They just win this week. They win comfortably against Carlton, and then a fascinating game with the two differing styles when they take on Brisbane in the prelim final at the Gabba. That's the way that I see it. And I think Simon Goodwin and his team would still be feeling reasonably confident about the prospect of winning another premiership, albeit their road has been made a bit more problematic. Got to get more out of Cozzy Pickett. There's no doubt about that. You saw what Bobby Hill could deliver for the Pies. So he's the wild card for me. He's got to work harder, I reckon, defensively, Cozzy, and then make the most of his opportunities, as we've spoken about already this morning.
Yeah, Pies had 5 goals from their recruits from last year, and 2 to McStay, 3 to Hill. Who is the player that comes in for Melbourne, or 2, because Brayshaw and Van Rooyen go out? What do you do with the front half setup? How do you take advantage of the 69 inside 50?
Well, me personally, and I know not a lot of people agree with this, I'd play Grundy. Right. I just think it gives you more flexibility with what you can do with Gawn. He looked an aerial threat, 4 contested marks for Gawn. I know that was out of the ruck, but to actually have him as a target in the forward half, and it might only be for half an hour a game, and the rest of it is in the ruck, but to have that flexibility for Grundy to stand up in the ruck and allow you to have Gawn as a target forward would be a nice option to have and a luxury. And then when Grundy's forward, he gives you more than what McDonald gives you, I think, and with the way that it looks. And then you've got the foot soldiers like a Jordan or someone to come in for Brayshaw. The interesting part about the Brayshaw injury is the flow-on effect for Petrarca, though, Bucks, and how they were forced to play him more as a midfielder when he's been so successful in the last 6 or 7 weeks playing as a forward for the majority of it. So that was what hurt them as well. Now, he was enormous.
A bit of a rider on that, though. Like the game was mostly in their front half. So even as a midfielder, he was at or in front of the ball. So I don't think that holds as much stock as the groundswell that it's got.
Okay, all right. Well, let's move on to the Friday night game.
I thought it says more. I think it was a fairly evenly matched game. Sydney were blown out early, and it's interesting. Like Collingwood got the jump on Melbourne, went on to win the game. Carlton got the jump on Sydney, went on to win the game. And I think it's validation for Carlton. So I'm going to go with Carlton. McCartan held Charlie Curnow really well. Mackay didn't have a lot to do, but I think Carlton's all-over team structure and the depth of their bottom six, as we discussed, out of 7, was the tail of the tape. They kept Sydney to 46 inside 50s, which is pretty good. Sydney have been an aggressive ball use side, but I think Carlton, with their consistent pressure on ball, with their really solid structure behind it, they were taking intercept marks. Wiedering, Kemp, Cincotta won some one-on-ones. And then you've got McGovern there, who hasn't had to play a big role, but I just thought that their pressure on ball is where it's at. So for them to be able to stand up and get that job done under pressure, given where they were 3 months ago, as I said, the Blues fans would be rapt about it. They will miss, well, depending on what happens with Martin, he will be a significant I suppose, domino to fall or to see what I think he'll end up missing, but that he will be a significant piece of the puzzle that won't be there for Carlton. I don't know if, and Mackay obviously with concussion, so there's a little bit of playing around that needs to be done in the front half. I think they're up against it. They beat Melbourne last time that these two sides played. Both sides are going to have their trouble or their challenges in the front third and what they do with some selection issues out of both of their games. But Carlton would be wrapped with what they've been able to achieve. To get a finals win this season is beyond the expectation 12 weeks ago. And the Carlton fans were up. Their voices were up and they were up and about. The MCG was absolutely rocking on Friday night, and we're going to expect the same thing next week.
Yeah, they've got nothing to lose now. They've already achieved their pass mark or over for the season, so anything else from here is an absolute bonus. So let's move on to the Saints and the Giants. You've already spoken in depth about the Giants. I think it speaks volumes of them. They've won at 11 different venues this year, which speaks to the resilience of the group, how well they are led.
Adelaide Oval is already one of them.
Yeah,
too.
They won against the Crows and came back from behind there. I think it was in round 18, so that would hold no fears for them. I think their preparation has been better than Port Adelaide's, considering they would have landed on Saturday night in Sydney. You get the extra night. Port Adelaide looked tired. They looked weary. They looked banged up. They got personnel issues. So, I mean, they'd be feeling really confident about their progression through to a prelim final. I'm not convinced on their key forwards. I think still that's, are you going to trust Riccardi in a final? Hogan's been okay, but I'm not. I think that would be a weakness of theirs. They got a lot of goals out of their midfield on the weekend. Certainly Kelly kicked a couple. Toby Green would be the one, but he was reasonably well held from Wilkie, but still had an influence. Their game's just in good order. They're well balanced inside, outside. They got speed across half back. My only query would be about their key forwards, but with Buckley and Taylor behind the ball now fit and firing, they're a difficult proposition.
I think one thing to watch for with the Giants is they move the ball so cleanly and directly off half back. I mean, they can go wide or they can change the angle. They've proven that they run off there really well. I think they're taller forwards in Hogan, Riccardi. Keith plays there at times as well. They lengthen away. Most of the damage is done through the midfield with their high backs or their high forwards or their midfielders. Their forwards, their taller forwards, get in one-on-one contests where they are out-positioned their defenders, and it just becomes a matter of the kick that accesses them going to their advantage. And Hogan held his man under the ball really well a couple of times and took marks out the back. Riccardi got caught in got a couple of one-on-ones where he had the drop on his direct opponent. So it's not as if you need to be an out-and-out star winning, 40-60 contests. They've been put into 75-25 contests where 3/4 of the time they have the drop on their opposition because of the way they're using the ball through the middle. So I think the Giants their forward play's been really strong in that regards. And Toby Green's not relied on, Callum Brown's not relied on, but they all play a role.
All right, what about the last game?
Oh, look, I thought that Brisbane. You can't go past Brisbane. It speaks to how strong they are at home. I thought they were. I mean, they've been really strong. And Port Adelaide were always going to come with a little bit with energy and bring their best, and I thought they did for the most part. But Brisbane's they played with authority. They were able to impose their brand over 4 quarters, and eventually they blew out a side that quite clearly was entrenched in the top 4 throughout the year. So we saw more than cameo roles played from players that haven't been asked to be in the best 4 or 5 players in their side. So Rayner stood up, Fletcher kicked 3, had 16 off a wing, mind you, a little bit of half forward. Wilmot and Coleman off the back were excellent. McCluggage, who hasn't been the first choice midfielder, but has gone in there since Ashcroft has gone down and played more minutes off the wing and into the midfield. So we heard it in Cam Rayner's voice. They're pretty confident. They know that they've got everything to play for and that they've got the goods.
When you are a coach and you come up with a theme for your group, how much thought goes into it? Because it backfired badly for Port Adelaide Bucks. They had the Oppenheimer theme, which was revealed by one of their players publicly on radio, and then it sort of got a little bit big on them.
Wasn't it accurate? Like everything blew up.
It did.
So that was an accurate theme.
Everything did blow up, but I've got 2 questions without notice. How much thought goes into coming up with a theme as a coach? Did you use them?
Yeah. I think theming's important to capture something that already exists in your group and in your challenge that you bring light to, and it just gives you a window into creatively stimulating the players and the connection between them. Yeah.
And the second question without notice is, when something is revealed publicly that shouldn't, how do you handle it as a coach? Do you ignore it?
Yeah, you just have to laugh about it. Yeah, okay. I used to be really wound up in that what happens in here stays in here. And the reality is that when you open it up a little bit, it's more fluid, and you own it anyway. Like, people can have their opinion on anything, but you still own it. And if you're not trying to protect something that can't be protected, or you have an expectation that's, that the threshold's up here, and then someone, feels from the heart that they want to talk about something, well then that can get problematic. But no, I didn't think we back an ounce on that, because if Port Adelaide had better personnel and been able to complete the game and finish off and won the game, we'd be saying, oh, how good was the theme about Oppenheimer? And then apparently it's not a great theme. Well, we do back an ounce on that. But
they sent the news journos to his Friday media conference, and it did get a little bit big on Ken, and he got quite testy in his media conference, and then he sort of revealed that he hadn't seen the movie, and it was a bit messy. And I think if they'd given it some more thought, they would have chosen a different theme. You got a question?
A different theme, or you just wouldn't talk about it?
Well, Oppenheimer, I haven't seen the movie, but it doesn't feel to me like it was the right fit.
What I felt was that you're talking
that caused all sorts of destruction and loss of life.
The themes aren't important externally; they lose context. It's about what the message is internally. Now, whether it connects 100% or 90% or 10%. Only people internally would know that. Well, as soon as it gets out of context, like for you to say, don't think it's the right theme, we've got no idea. But it didn't work in this instant. Apparently,
it was a distraction.
Apparently, Collingwood
and
Melbourne both have an America's Cup theme.
Okay.
And both of them.
Both of them.
Talking about how it's, you've got to take this hurdle and then that hurdle, and then we end up sort of, you've got to be ready to go when the... So... I've discovered that both of them went with an America's Cup theme. So
at the same time for the same game.
Apparently, well, not necessarily for that game, for their finals campaign. So anyway, we'll see.
There's some breaking news with us.
How would you handle Bayley Fritsch's lack of contest against when Quainer went back and took a mark with 4 minutes to go? How, if you're coaching Bayley Fritsch, how do you handle that situation?
Like I would with any poor effort in a big game. You need to show that in front of the group in a review scenario and ask the player what was going through his mind in that situation and what he would do differently next time. And I think the answer, if Bayley was answering it honestly, would be I needed to be more physical and needed to bring that ball to ground.
Reckon Cozzy Pickett would have been happy with that? Because he was down there looking for. I don't think it would have been a soft drop. Fritsch would have if he'd attacked the ball, straight lined at the ball, he would have collected Quainer, and that says a bit about the market was for Quainer and to put himself in that position. But Fritsch definitely looked after him.
Do we need Michael Christian?
No, I don't. Not if you're not going to grant him independence or that role independence. It's not about Michael Christian, it's about the role.
The role, yeah.
And if you're not going to grant that role independence, I don't think you need him, no.
Where to now for the Sydney Swans and the fallout for their campaign, where their last two efforts on the MCG have been poor, but they're a side that will never rebuild and they'll always stay up there. So what is your confidence level in them?
I think they had a lot of injuries to their key backs in particular. I thought they were wishy-washy this year. I don't think they were able to really recover from getting knocked around in the grand final last year. And I even saw echoes of that in the first quarter. Now, that's a long bow, but it looked to me like final elimination game, it's all on the line. They didn't quite pop early in the game. I thought Carlton came out far better than Sydney did. I think, there's great talent there. Goulden's only played 65-odd games of football. He's a star.
How good is he?
Warner's a star. I think Blakey off the back is going to be brilliant. Like Campbell was good. I think young Sheldrick, who didn't play in their final side, I think he's going to come through. I've got no fears, and I think Logan McDonald has shown in the last 18 months what he's capable of, and I think that he'll continue to go. I don't have any fears for Sydney long term in terms of their talent, in terms of their list. It will be a mental challenge, and sometimes you need to travel this journey and callous the mind and callous through failure.
Let's get to the Dogs straight away. So I told you 2 weeks ago that Mark Webb would be departing the Dogs. He's an assistant coach. I can tell you this morning that Travis Varco will also depart the Dogs at the end of the season over the next few weeks. So he's been a development coach since the end of 2020. He's also had a significant role with the club's Indigenous players. So that's 3 coaching changes so far, with Rowan Smith, the other one, with more footy department changes to come. Now, Brendan Lade will stay. He's contracted. Matt Spanger, I believe, will stay as well. Even though he's not contracted, he'll be offered a new deal. The VFL coach, Stuart Edge, is contracted and will stay. I can also confirm this morning that Stuart Dew isn't going to the Dogs. That's sort of been widely reported that he's going to end up there under Luke Beveridge.
Where's he going?
Don't know, but he's not going to the Dogs. So that's the news out of the Western Bulldogs as they continue their review. It's not done yet. Now that both male teams are out of contention, that review will be ongoing.
So they want coaches that can challenge Luke Beveridge, and they feel they haven't had that.
I think that's part of it, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Why'd you hesitate when I asked
Because
that?
I assume there's a lot more to it. I assume they want more than just a coach who can challenge. A coach who is actually a good coach, tactician, good with the players. I think they probably want coaches who can tick a lot of boxes. But clearly they feel that the football department needs a refresh, and that's what they're doing.
All right, take us through the MRO decisions, which have been all contentious, really.
Yeah, well, Jack Martin, careless, high contact, high impact, 2 weeks he was given for that, and Carlton will take this to the tribunal this week, either to get it downgraded to 1 or to get him off completely. I think they're more likely to get it downgraded to 1. How did you see the Jack Martin incident, Bucks?
I thought 2 was fair.
Yep.
2?
I thought that was bordering on intentional. There's an argument that he was trying to go for the ball with the fist. But I thought it was really aggressive. I thought it was outside the rules.
Jacob Van Rooyen got 1 week. I don't expect Melbourne is going to challenge this, and it will force the Demons to have a reshuffle of their forward line with Brodie Grundy in the mix. Zach Butters, a $4,000 fine with 2 early guilty pleas for 2 separate incidents with Dane Zorko on Saturday night, and obviously Braden Maynard's the main one. Just a quick answer on this from both of you. Do you think Braden Maynard should get off at the tribunal?
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely, 100% should get off. No doubt in my mind.
Should it have been sent to the tribunal?
No.
Bucks?
No, I don't. It had to be graded careless, and
Yeah.
I don't think that it met that threshold. I can understand the hysteria around the contact and the fact the player was concussed and the emotion around that, but no.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to a trade update. We'll start with Sydney, who we think are going to be really busy.
They're going to be busy. They are desperate for a ruck to replace Tom Hickey and a key defender.
Grundy?
Well, Brodie Grundy is absolutely one that they're looking at. You asked Tom Harley the question last week, did they meet with Brodie Grundy the week before? And he gave a non-committal answer. I've asked the football boss, Charlie Gardner. I've asked his manager, Robbie D'Orazio, and there's been no denials. So I can't confirm they've met Brodie Grundy, but at the moment, if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And they're certainly interested in Brodie Grundy. They're also certainly interested in Ben Mackay, but as are Essendon, as are Hawthorn, and that means that Ben Mackay is going to be seriously well paid as well, because no matter what, his price is going up, and it means North Melbourne will probably get compensation at pick 3, which is after their pick 2.
Yeah, he's turned into Glenn Jakovic in this trade period somehow. My goodness.
That's what happens when you're that tall, Kane.
Wow.
It's decision time for Dylan Stephens, pick 5 in the 2019 draft. He's played 40-odd games. The Swans have had a deal in front of him for a number of weeks now. He'll have his exit meeting this week. North Melbourne is interested, and there is a feeling around Clubland that he's going to look to go elsewhere, but he hasn't confirmed that yet, and the Swans don't know what he's going to do yet. Lewis Melican is expected to stay. Sam Reid, Sam Wicks, and Ryan Clark are also out of contract, so a bit happening at the Swans this week.
All right, how did the Saints get a deal done for Henry?
That is a great question, given that they have told all 17 other clubs that they are going to prioritise the draft, and then they're going to presumably use one of these draft picks, and Fremantle would like a pick between 15 and 25 or thereabouts for Liam Henry to get that player in the door. So it was between Hawthorn and the Saints, and Liam Henry has chosen St Kilda as his preferred destination. So I'm not sure how they get it done. It might be a future pick. They might have to find a way to get picks back in if they want to trade out a Jack Billings or a Dougal Howard or a Hunter Clark, Nick Caulfield, Daniel McKenzie's an unrestricted free agent as well. I'm sure Ben Patton would go if there was a deal for him elsewhere, even though he's contracted. So Jimmy Webster's an unrestricted free agent. And the big one is Jade Gresham at St Kilda, who had a lot of interest early in the year, but I think that's probably faded in recent weeks. I know Carlton were interested, but I think it's more likely now that Jade Gresham stays.
I think that's the most fascinating watch for me off season is what St Kilda do with their list. The fact that they played the least number of players across the home and away season, and that might have been a little bit around injury. I don't think so. I think it was mainly around the faith of the depth of the list. So Ross will have a fair bit to say about who stays and who goes, and we'll get a real understanding of where he thinks the list sits on the other side of the off-season.
The one you would trade is the captain's steal, but you're not going to do that because of he's the captain and he's an important figure for the club. But in terms of what they need, they don't need Jack Steele. And there's clubs out there that need inside midfielders.
Well, the Swans is one.
And Geelong would be the other one. So ideally, he would be the one that is expendable, but he's your skipper. So there's some players you don't go there with, and they've just got too many of the same type through that midfield. Henry's a great get for them. He's perfect for them. Steele would be the one I'd be looking to move, but he's the skipper, so it makes it a bit problematic.
No coach will be more involved in exit meetings across the league than Ross Lyon this week. He will be a central player, even more than any other coach, into what happens with the futures of these players. Just a quick one on Liam Henry as well. So the Saints have pick 12. That's too much. Pick 31's not enough. So
why is it too much? What was he, pick 9?
Yeah, the Saints aren't going to give up pick 12 for
No,
Liam
I know
Henry.
they're not, but that would be around his value, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's probably just well, Fremantle value him about 15 to 20, 25. So
Okay.
I don't think it's going to be pick 12. And we'll see how that... I mean, the key to that deal is Colin Young, the manager. He'll have to broker the deal, and they'll have to get creative to get it done.
You got confidence in Colin Young to be able to do that?
Well, they couldn't get it done for Bobby Hill or Rory Lobb year one, but then they got it done for Bobby Hill and Rory Lobb the year after. I think Colin Young is the sort of manager that works on these deals for a long time before the end of the season. So I'd be surprised if him and Gubby Allen and Sauce and Ross Lyon can't come to an agreement of some sort.
What's the AFL's role with The Voice?
This is an interesting one. So if you missed it last week, the AFL has decided not to use finals or the grand final as a vehicle to promote its position on the Voice referendum, which has been clear for a number of months now. Those in favour have said, good, leave politics out of footy. Those against have argued the league is walking back from its commitment and its very public stance from a few months ago. And the reasoning is this. Finals are seen to be sacrosanct at the AFL, not just for this instance, but also over a number of years. There's never really any social causes promoted in finals. And there is a feeling as well at AFL House that being too overt in support of the Voice might actually drive people to vote no And the AFL doesn't want to be an institution of dissent, which is an interesting take in itself as well. But players, if they want to support the voice, the AFL will support that, and the league will support that like the whole way through. And based on the polling they did at Clubland, Kane and Bucks, before the commission took a position, the support for the yes vote is very high among players. So we'll see how it works out, but these are the conversations ongoing behind the scenes at the moment. Just a last quick one on St Kilda. This is an important one before I go. I'm aware St Kilda's statement about Tim Membry left things a touch open, but it's super important we don't read too much into things, jump to conclusions, or participate in a game of whispers without actual knowledge of the situation. I have knowledge of the situation, and the most alarmist and unfair of what I've seen is factually incorrect, and it breaches the very reasonable request for privacy that the Saints asked for on Saturday. That's all I want to say on that matter.
Pretty important thing that you just said there, Tom. Thank you for that, mate.